The message came at 6:17 on a Thursday evening, just as the snow outside my window had begun to turn into thin, icy rain. It was from my mother, though. I didn't have to look to know. I had set her ringtone years ago, a sharp little chime that somehow managed to sound both cheerful and cold. The message was short, almost polite. Christmas this year will just be Michael's family and the in-laws. It's simpler that way. I stared at the screen. My brother's family, not mine. Simpler that way. The words sat there clean and efficient like a surgical cut. I felt nothing at first. No anger, no disbelief, just that dull weight pressing against the ribs, the familiar silence that comes after being reminded again of your rank in the family hierarchy. I typed 4 words back. Have a wonderful time. No punctuation, no questions. Then I placed the phone face down on the counter and watched the snow melt against the glass, turning into streaks of gray. It was the same every year, a new reason, a new version of the same sentence. Last Christmas it had been, we're staying closer to home. The year before, Michael's hosting and there isn't enough space. Always logistics, never emotion. My brother was the sun in their sky. His wife Lydia, the elegant lawyer from Charleston, had become the crown jewel. They were the picture-perfect family, 2 kids, a big house, perfect smiles, the kind of people my parents loved to show off. I was the footnote, the daughter who worked with computers, who kept to herself. Every family has a narrative, and mine was simple. Michael was the success story, and I was the maintenance code in the background. The silence in my apartment stretched out like a thread pulled too tight. I had built this place for peace, a minimalist loft overlooking Boston's waterfront, polished steel and cold quartz. It was a fortress of calm, one I had earned line by line of code, contract by contract. But that night, the stillness felt heavy, oppressive, like standing underwater. I opened the fridge, took out a bottle of wine and poured a glass without thinking. The cork rolled off the counter and disappeared somewhere under the island. I didn't bother looking for it. My hands were steady, almost mechanical. I had been through this ritual enough times to have perfected it. The phone buzzed again. This time it was my grandmother Eloise. I smiled before answering, because with her I never had to build armor. "Izzy, sweetheart," she said, her voice a blend of warmth and paper-thin fragility. "You sound tired. Are you still working?" I turned toward the window, watching the city blur in the rain. "Just finished," I said softly. "How's your day?" She laughed, a low, gentle sound. I burned the gingerbread again. "Your mother told me about Christmas plans. You'll be coming, right?" Her words hit harder than the message itself. She didn't know. My mother hadn't told her. "I'm not sure yet, Grandma," I said, keeping my tone even. "I might have a work trip." There was a pause. "That's a shame," she said quietly. "It isn't the same without you." I promised to call her again soon, then hung up before the tightness in my throat could turn into something else. The truth was, I'd spent 33 Christmases waiting for my mother to look at me the way she looked at my brother. She never did. I wasn't the kind of daughter she knew how to love. I didn't fit into her curated image, the perfect Southern matriarch with perfect children and picture-perfect dinners. I was too analytical, too quiet, too independent. The daughter who didn't need to be rescued was never part of the story she wanted to tell. I finished the wine and sat at my desk. The glow from the laptop washed over my hands. The screensaver flicked away to reveal a calendar filled with meetings, contract reviews, escrow updates, compliance calls. My company, Architect Systems, had just completed a $200 million acquisition. I was the chief architect behind its security core, the part no one outside the firm ever saw but everyone relied on. My father once said I should get a real job, something stable. Stability to him meant obedience. To me, it meant freedom. I had spent years building systems that couldn't be exploited, structures that couldn't be quietly rewritten like I had been. I opened a new tab and checked the family group chat. A mistake. It was full of photos, Lydia showing off centerpieces, my mother approving each design with heart emojis, my uncle joking about bourbon and snow. A proper family Christmas, he wrote. Proper. I looked at those words until they blurred. Proper meant them. It never meant me. My mother would tell people she had 2 children, but in her heart, she only ever had one heir. I was the contingency. I set the laptop aside and walked to the window. Below the harbor shimmered under the streetlights boats, rocking gently against the current. I thought of all the times I had tried to earn inclusion bringing gifts. No one opened cooking dishes. No one touched laughing at jokes I didn't find funny. Love, I realized, had been a project I was never assigned to lead. But respect, that was different. Respect could be built. Respect could be coded into existence. I sat back down and opened my encrypted email. One message blinked at the top, confirmation of the trust review I had helped my grandmother arrange months ago. She was still the primary trustee of the Delaney Family Trust, a portfolio that had once belonged to my grandfather. My parents thought of it as theirs, but technically it wasn't. Eloise managed it quietly, the way she managed everything, with patience and discretion. She had mentioned before that she wanted to simplify things, make sure the next generation handled it fairly. I remembered her saying that fairness didn't mean equality, it meant correction. My phone lit up again. A group notification. Lydia had posted a photo captioned, "Testing table setups for Christmas Eve." It was a long, rustic table decorated with golden cream. Beneath it, my mother commented, "So beautiful, dear. Can't wait to host everyone. Everyone." The word hit harder than any insult. They didn't even realize I could see it. Or maybe they did, and that was the point. I closed the app, heart rate steady, breath calm. There was a part of me that had once begged to be seen. That part had died a long time ago. Now all that was left was clarity. I opened my travel folder. There was an itinerary I had drafted months earlier, but never booked a gift for Grandma Eloise. She had once said she'd always wanted to see Paris at Christmas, to stand under the Eiffel Tower and sip champagne. She'd said it in passing, probably not thinking anyone was listening. I had listened. I had made a plan back then, a hotel, 2 business-class tickets, museum passes, but she had fallen ill and told me to save it for next time. There had never been a next time, until now. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. The rain outside turned to snow again, the flakes catching the orange light of the harbor lamps. I opened the airline portal and typed Boston to Paris, 2 passengers, business class. December 22nd. The price flashed on the screen, more than most people spent in a month. I didn't blink. I pressed confirm. The booking email appeared seconds later. "We look forward to welcoming you on board." I picked up my phone, opened a new message to Grandma. My thumbs hesitated only once before typing. "I have an idea. Paris. Business class. Pack a coat." I stared at the message, then hit send. It turned blue, delivered. Outside, the snow kept falling, quiet and endless, covering everything that had come before. I exhaled slowly, a smile curving at the corner of my mouth. They had uninvited me from Christmas, so I would make a new one mine. Not out of bitterness, but out of balance. Out of the understanding that sometimes the only way to prove your worth is to stop asking for a seat at someone else's table and build your own under brighter lights with better company. I poured another glass of wine, raised it to the empty room, and whispered, "To Paris." That night, as the city disappeared beneath a veil of falling snow, I didn't just close my laptop. I closed the door on the version of me that kept waiting to be invited. The next morning, the world outside was white. Snow had finally settled overnight, layering the city in quiet surrender. I woke to the sound of my phone vibrating on the nightstand, the faint hum weaving through the silence. It wasn't family. It was work, an automated alert from ArcTech's security system. I dismissed it and sat up, blinking at the pale winter light spilling through the windows. My reflection in the glass looked softer than I felt. For once, I wasn't dreading the day. There was something about knowing a decision was already made that made everything easier to breathe through. The email from the airline sat in my inbox, crisp and official. Departure December 22nd, business class. Passenger 1, Isabella Monroe. Passenger 2, Eloise Delaney. I scrolled down through the itinerary. Paris, 5 nights, return flexible. It felt unreal, but also inevitable, as though the idea had been sitting quietly in me for years, waiting for the right night to step forward. I clicked open another tab and began arranging the rest hotel transport dinner reservations. For someone whose family had built their lives around appearances, I was about to stage the most elegant rebellion of my life. Hotel Mongeon, tucked near the Tuileries Gardens, had been my choice before, the kind of place that whispered wealth rather than shouted it. I reserved a suite overlooking the rooftops, noting the view of the Eiffel Tower in the distance. It wasn't just about comfort, it was symbolism. A quiet statement that beauty didn't have to ask for permission to exist. After that came the details: a private driver, a note to the concierge, requesting fresh peonies in the room, a menu that included Earl Grey tea and ginger biscuits. Grandma loved ginger. I paused at the payment page, watching the cursor blink next to the total. It was more than my parents' yearly mortgage payment. I didn't flinch. They had always measured worth in what could be displayed. I had learned to measure mine in what couldn't be taken back. By noon, my list was done. Flights, hotel, insurance, medication requests, all confirmed. There was only one call left to make. I dialed the number for my grandmother's landline in Savannah. It rang 3 times before she answered, her voice bright, familiar, and warm. "Izzy, sweetheart, are you calling to say you've changed your mind about Christmas?" I smiled into the phone. "Sort of," I said. "How are you feeling today? Better than yesterday?" "The doctor says I'm stubborn enough to outlive him." She laughed softly. "Are you coming home, dear? I made your favorite toffee cookies." "Not exactly," I said. "I was thinking, maybe we could spend Christmas somewhere different this year." A pause. I could almost hear her tilt her head. "Different? How? Paris?" I said. The silence on the other end was long, stretching out like breath before a song. Then she whispered, "Paris. You can't be serious." "I am," I said. "I already booked everything. Business class flights. The hotel is right by the gardens and they'll have tea waiting when we get there." She let out a small sound, half laugh, half disbelief. "Good Lord, Izzy, that's extravagant." "Not extravagant," I said. "Necessary." Her voice softened. "What brought this on?" I stared at the window, snowflakes tracing paths down the glass. "I just don't want to spend another Christmas being invisible." I waited for her to respond, but she didn't fill the silence with platitudes or advice. She just listened. Finally, she said, "When do we leave?" 2 days, I said, smiling despite the sudden ache in my chest. "Well," she said, voice trembling with excitement, "then I'd better find my old travel scarf." After the call, I sat in the stillness and exhaled. For the first time in years, Christmas wasn't something being done to me. It was something I was shaping with my own hands. I spent the afternoon gathering everything I'd need: passports, confirmation numbers, power adapters, a black wool coat I hadn't worn in ages. As I folded clothes into my suitcase, the act felt ceremonial. Every piece of fabric, every small deliberate choice was a rebellion, stitched in silence. When night fell, I walked down to the harbor. The snow had slowed to a fine mist and the world looked washed clean. A couple passed me, their arms linked, their laughter echoing against the water. I thought of the family in Aspen, their carefully arranged table settings and camera-ready smiles. I imagined the polite toasts, the jokes that would circle the table until someone remembered I wasn't there. I could almost hear my mother's voice, "Izzy's probably working late again." A practiced excuse, well-rehearsed and comfortably false. I looked out over the dark water and whispered to myself, "Not this year." Back home, I sat at my desk and opened my private account. There was something almost sacred about seeing the numbers there. The accumulation of every night I had stayed up debugging systems, every weekend I'd spent writing code, while the rest of the world was out to brunch. I transferred a small sum into a new trust account. Eloise Paris Fund, I labeled it. I'd made enough money to buy silence, but I preferred to fund joy. The next morning, I called the airline to confirm special assistance for an elderly passenger. The agent on the other end was courteous professional. "We'll make sure Mrs. Delaney is comfortable," she said. "Anything else you'd like us to arrange?" "Yes," I said after a moment. "Champagne as soon as she's seated." There was a pause. "Of course, Miss Monroe." I ended the call satisfied. The pieces were aligning perfectly, and I could feel the quiet thrill that came when a plan began to take form. It wasn't about showing off, it was about rewriting the narrative. For years, my family had defined me by absence, the one who doesn't come home, the one who's too busy. They had no idea that absence could be power, that the person missing from their table could build a bigger one somewhere else. That evening, I called Grandma again to check in. She was breathless, her voice bubbling with energy. "I've been looking through my closet," she said. "Do you think my old wool coat will do?" "It's perfect," I said. "Paris can be cold, but I'll make sure you're warm." "Oh, and Izzy," she said after a pause. "Your mother called. She mentioned something about you being busy." I smiled. "You could say that." She sounded unsettled. "I'm sure she is," I said, my tone even. "It's hard losing control of the narrative." "Be kind, dear," she said, her voice tender but firm. "Revenge is only beautiful when it teaches grace." "I'm not seeking revenge," I said, though even I wasn't sure that was entirely true. "I just want a Christmas that doesn't hurt." She sighed softly. "Then, let's make it the best one we've ever had." After we hung up, I looked around my apartment. The suitcase sat by the door ready. The snow outside had stopped, and the city was quiet, blanketed in white. I poured myself a small glass of whiskey and sat on the couch, the glow of the window washing the room in silver light. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like someone waiting to be chosen. I felt steady, deliberate, whole. I glanced at my phone, no new messages from my parents, no last-minute apologies or explanations. Just silence. And in that silence, I felt something like peace. I turned off the lights, leaving only the view of the harbor visible in the dark. Tomorrow, I would drive to Savannah and pick up the only person who had ever looked at me without judgment. Tomorrow, I would take her somewhere she'd always dreamed of going. Somewhere that didn't require anyone's permission. Somewhere that belonged only to us. I whispered the words softly to the quiet room, testing how they sounded out loud. "Paris," I said. "Let's go to Paris." And for the first time in years, the word Christmas didn't sting. It sparkled. By the time the snow stopped falling, I already knew where I was going next, south to Savannah, to pick up the only person who'd never made me feel like a guest in my own family. The highway to Savannah was long and nearly empty, a silver ribbon cutting through frost-covered pines. The radio murmured soft jazz, low enough not to intrude on my thoughts. I'd left Boston before dawn, a thermos of coffee beside me and my suitcase in the trunk. Every mile felt like distance, not just from a city, but from a lifetime of being quiet in the wrong rooms. The snow that had blanketed the harbor had turned into thin sunlight by the time I crossed into Georgia. My mother once said the South teaches you to smile even when your teeth hurt. I had stopped smiling for her a long time ago. When I pulled into Grandma Eloise's driveway, the house looked smaller than I remembered, but warmer too. The front porch sagged a little, and the white paint on the shutters had faded to a soft gray. I sat in the car for a moment, letting the engine idle as I watched her through the window. She was setting a small table with her usual precision, a napkin folded into a triangle, a vase with one daisy. I turned off the ignition and stepped out into the crisp air. The scent of pine needles and distant chimney smoke filled my lungs. It was the smell of childhood, of the few places I had ever felt safe. The front door opened before I could knock. "Isabella Monroe," she said, her smile blooming like sunlight. "You look tired and underfed. That must mean you're successful." I laughed, stepping into her arms. She was small but steady, her embrace familiar and grounding. "I missed you, Grandma." "Of course you did," she said, releasing me. "Everyone misses me eventually. She glanced at the car. Is that all you're bringing? For now, I said, closing the trunk. We'll travel light. Her eyes narrowed with suspicion. Travel. I followed her inside, pretending not to hear. The house smelled like cinnamon and clean laundry. The same porcelain figurines still sat on the mantel, staring down with delicate indifference. I set my bag by the stairs, and she handed me a cup of coffee before I could ask. You still take it black, she said. Some habits survive, I said, sipping. Like your gingerbread, she chuckled. I didn't burn it this time. We sat at the kitchen table, the morning light cutting through lace curtains, landing on the faded tablecloth. She studied me for a long moment. You look different, she said softly. Not tired, just decided. I guess I am. Does this have something to do with your mother's text? I met her gaze. You heard she told me she was simplifying the guest list. Her voice was calm, but her eyes had steel in them. She always did like to simplify women she couldn't control. I smiled, feeling that quiet understanding pass between us. I'm not angry, Grandma, just finished. She leaned back in her chair, nodding slowly. Finished is a powerful word, Izzy. Dangerous, too. What are you planning? Something different, I said, my tone deliberately vague. She tilted her head. Different as in practical or different as in trouble? I grinned. Somewhere between the two. After breakfast, she insisted I help her take down a box from the attic labeled Christmas 1974. Just to see if the lights still work, she said. We carried it downstairs and opened it in the living room. Inside were strings of colored bulbs, a few broken ornaments, and a tangle of silver tinsel. She pulled out an old snow globe and shook it gently. The tiny Eiffel Tower inside shimmered under the falling flakes. Where did you get that? I asked. Your grandfather bought it at a flea market, she said. I used to keep it on the kitchen window ledge. Told myself I'd see the real thing one day. Why didn't you? Her smile faltered. Life, I suppose. Someone always needed something, and I kept telling myself there'd be time later. Then later turned into 40 years. I watched her trace the edge of the glass. What if later came now? She looked up at me, eyes sharp behind her reading glasses. Izzy, what are you up to? I sat beside her, holding the snow globe between us. I booked the flights. We're leaving tomorrow. Paris. You and me. For a moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator. Her hand trembled slightly, then stilled. You're not joking. No. Her eyes glistened, not from shock, but something deeper, like she was holding back a part of herself that hadn't been allowed to breathe for years. Paris, she whispered. I used to imagine the air there smelled like sugar. It smells like freedom, I said quietly. She laughed softly, brushing away a tear. You don't even speak French. Money's a universal language. She stared at me, then shook her head. Your mother will lose her mind. She already did, I said. This isn't about her anymore. Eloise leaned forward, studying me the way she used to when I was a child trying to explain my logic puzzles. You've thought this through every detail. Flights, hotel, wheelchair assistance at the airport, medical clearance from your doctor. I even called your pharmacy. Her eyes widened. Good Lord, you're serious. Completely. She leaned back, smiling through disbelief. My daughter will call it irresponsible. She can call it whatever she wants, I said. We'll be on another continent. Her laughter filled the room, bright and unrestrained. You're your grandfather's girl, she said finally. He always believed in bold moves. That afternoon we packed together. She insisted on bringing her ancient tapestry handbag, the one with the brass clasp that barely worked. I offered her a new leather one, but she waved it away. Some things carry luck, she said. I don't travel without it. She picked out a few dresses, her wool coat, a scarf that had belonged to my mother before the distance between them had frozen solid. She hesitated before folding it. Maybe I'll give it back to her one day, she murmured. I didn't answer. By evening, the house looked like it was holding its breath. The suitcases sat by the door, her passport gleaming under the lamp. We ate dinner by the fire, soup and cornbread, simple and comforting. She kept glancing at the clock, as though afraid time might change its mind. I haven't flown in 20 years, she said softly. Then it's overdue, I said. After dinner, I stepped outside for some air. The December night was still the sky, a dark velvet dome pricked with stars. My breath curled into clouds as I stood on the porch feeling the weight of what tomorrow meant. This wasn't just a trip. It was a correction, a rebalancing of a lifetime's worth of being sidelined. They would wake up on Christmas morning to a family photo missing 2 faces, and for once the absence would speak louder than any presence ever could. When I came back in, she was sitting by the fire with a mug of cocoa. The flickering light painted her features in gold and shadow. She looked up at me. "Are you sure you're ready for what this means I am?" I said. "You know your mother will call the moment she finds out. She'll have to dial international," Eloise chuckled. "You sound so calm." "I am calm," I said. "Because for the first time I'm not waiting to be invited. I'm the one choosing where to go." She studied me for a long time, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded. "Good, just promise me one thing." "What's that?" "When they talk about this and don't let them turn it into a scandal. Let it stay what it really is." "And what's that?" "A love story," she said simply, "between a granddaughter who refused to stay small and an old woman who finally decided to see the world." I smiled, feeling something warm unfurl in my chest. "I can live with that." She sipped her cocoa, satisfied. Then it settled. Tomorrow we fly. As the fire dimmed to embers, I sat beside her, the snow globe still on the table between us. Inside it, the tiny Eiffel Tower shimmered in endless snowfall. It felt like a promise kept even before the plane left the ground. Outside, the night deepened, and somewhere in the distance, the faint chime of a church bell marked the hour. Tomorrow, everything would change. By sunrise, our suitcases were in the trunk, her passport in my bag, and the road to the airport stretching ahead like the first clean page of a new life. The airport was chaos wrapped in tinsel. Families moved like slow, noisy currents through the security lines, dragging overstuffed suitcases and shouting at each other across plastic bins. Somewhere, a child was crying over a lost stuffed reindeer. I stood with Grandma Eloise at the edge of the check-in counter, our luggage stacked neatly beside us, 2 passports in my hand. The agent behind the counter smiled, her holiday lipstick a shade too bright. "Good morning. Where are we flying today, Paris?" I said, sliding our documents forward. The woman's fingers froze over the keyboard for a moment, her expression softening when she looked at Eloise. "That's quite the Christmas trip," she said. Eloise's eyes twinkled. "It's long overdue, dear," the agent chuckled. "I'll make sure you're well taken care of." We moved through security faster than I expected. Eloise insisted on walking, refusing the wheelchair service I had arranged. "If I'm flying halfway across the world, I'm going to do it on my own 2 feet, she said. She walked slowly, but proudly, her posture straight, her scarf a swirl of deep green wool against the gray terminal. People looked at her, some smiled, some stared, but she carried herself like she had waited 80 years to take this walk. At the gate, she stood by the window gazing out at the plains. "You know," she said, "your grandfather used to talk about the world like it was a series of locked doors. He said if you had the right key, you could go anywhere." "And you believed him?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "No, I learned to pick locks instead." We both laughed, though her eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. The loudspeaker crackled with our boarding announcement. "Passengers in Group 1, for Flight 227 to Paris, you may now begin boarding." "That's us," I said. She turned toward me, a mix of disbelief and delight on her face. "Isabella, I can't believe you're actually doing this." "Neither can they," I said, glancing at my phone, where a half-dozen missed calls from my mother filled the screen. I silenced it, dropped it into my bag, and held out my arm. "Shall we?" The first-class cabin felt like another world, entirely quiet, serene, bathed in soft gold light. As soon as Eloise settled into her seat, the flight attendant appeared with 2 flutes of champagne. "Compliments of the crew," she said. "Merry Christmas, ladies." Eloise hesitated, her fingers trembling slightly around the glass. "I've never had champagne before," she admitted. Then tonight, I said, raising mine, you'll have it at 30,000 feet. She clinked her glass against mine, eyes shining. To my granddaughter, she said softly, for making the impossible seem small. The plane lifted through clouds heavy with snow, the city shrinking below us into a scatter of lights. As we leveled off, Eloise leaned back, looking out the window with an expression I hadn't seen on her in years, something like awe. It's strange, she murmured. When you're young, you think there's a limit to how high you can go. Then, one day you're here, and it feels like there never was. I smiled, closing my eyes briefly. It's all perspective, Grandma. The view only changes when you rise above the noise. She chuckled softly. That's exactly what your mother doesn't understand. I opened my laptop mostly to distract myself, but she reached over and closed it gently. No work, she said. We're between worlds now. Let it wait. For once I listened. Hours passed in a quiet rhythm, the hum of the engines, the soft rustle of blankets, the occasional clink of cutlery as meals were served. Eloise fell asleep somewhere over the Atlantic, her head resting gently against the seat, her breathing even. I watched her for a long time, thinking about all the ways she had carried this family alone. My mother's ambition, my father's pride, my brother's charm. She had held them all up quietly, gracefully. I wondered if anyone had ever thanked her for it. I picked up my phone again, scrolling through messages I hadn't read. My mother's words were sharp, desperate. Where are you? Call me now. This isn't funny. My brother's text followed Mom's freaking out. Just tell her you're home. There was even one from Lydia. You can't just take Grandma like that. People are asking questions. I turned the phone face down on the tray table. Let them ask. When Eloise woke, it was just before dawn. A faint pink glow spilled across the cabin. She blinked, slowly smiled, and whispered, Is that the sunrise? I nodded. Over France. Her eyes filled the reflection of morning clouds dancing in them. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. It's only the beginning, I said. She reached over and squeezed my hand. You know, I thought the best years of my life were behind me. Turns out, they were just waiting for a good pilot. We both laughed, and for a moment, the years between us vanished. When the plane landed, the cabin filled with soft chatter and the shuffle of people eager to disembark. The flight attendant smiled as she helped Eloise gather her things. Was it everything you hoped for? Eloise looked at me, then back at the woman. More, she said. Far more. Customs was a blur. The moment we stepped into the arrivals hall, a man in a black suit held up a sign that read Madame Delaney. Eloise stopped short. That's me, she whispered, astonished. I grinned. Yes, it is. He greeted us in careful English and took her suitcase. When he opened the door to the waiting Mercedes, she turned to me, eyes wide. I've never been called Madame in my life. Then let's start now, I said. The drive into the city was quiet, filled with flashes of wonder. The Seine glinting in the sunlight, the iron silhouette of the Eiffel Tower rising in the distance, the pale stone facades that looked exactly like the pictures she'd kept in her scrapbook for decades. When the car stopped in front of the hotel, Eloise whispered, It's real. The hotel staff treated her like royalty. The manager greeted her by name, his accent smooth as silk. Welcome to Paris, Madame Delaney. Your suite is ready. Eloise stepped inside and gasped softly. The room was flooded with golden light, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the city like a painting. On the table, a vase of pale pink peonies waited, their scent subtle and sweet. Oh, Izzy, she said, turning slowly in the middle of the room. It's perfect. I smiled, setting our bags down. Only the best for my favorite co-conspirator. She walked to the balcony, her hands trembling as she pushed open the glass doors. The city stretched before us, rooftops, spires, distant bells. She took a deep breath of the cold air and closed her eyes. I can't believe I'm really here. You earned it, I said quietly. She turned back, her gaze steady. And you did too, my dear. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise. We stood there together, two women on opposite ends of life, but united by the same kind of silence, the kind that had shaped us both. Down below, Paris moved like a heartbeat. Somewhere church bells began to ring soft and distant. Eloise smiled. "Do you think your mother's seen the messages?" Yet I laughed. "She's probably organizing a search party as we speak." "Well," she said, raising an imaginary glass, "here's to being unfindable." That night, as Paris shimmered outside our window, I ordered dinner for two. We ate by candlelight, her laughter mingling with the sounds of the city below. Every detail, the food, the view, the warmth, felt like something sacred, something stolen back from the years we'd lost to other people's expectations. Before bed, I checked my phone one last time. More missed calls. One new message from my mother. "You've made a mistake, Isabella. We need to talk." I stared at it for a moment, then deleted it. Eloise's voice floated from the bedroom. "Izzy, come look." The towers sparkling, I joined her at the window. The Eiffel Tower blazed to life, in white lights shimmering against the night. She reached for my hand. "Promise me something," she whispered. "Anything. Don't let this be about them. Let it be about us." I nodded. "It already is." Outside, the city glowed like a promise kept. Inside, for the first time in my life, Christmas didn't feel like a wound. It felt like freedom. As the lights of Paris began to shimmer beneath the clouds, Grandma Eloise reached for my hand and whispered, "Promise me this isn't a dream," and I smiled, knowing the real journey was only just beginning. Paris greeted us like a secret finally told. The air was cold and damp, carrying the scent of roasted chestnuts from a street vendor and the faint echo of an accordion playing somewhere far away. Eloise stepped out of the car and just stood there, her gloved hand pressed to her mouth. "Oh, Izzy," she whispered. "It's exactly how I imagined it." "No, it's better." The driver unloaded our luggage as the hotel porter appeared, offering a polite bow. The golden letters above the entrance gleamed against the gray sky, La Grande Étoile. The marble steps shone as if waiting for her. She climbed them slowly, taking in every detail, the wreaths on the doors, the chandeliers visible through the glass, the hum of quiet luxury. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of lilies and wax. A pianist played softly by the fire. The manager greeted us in flawless English. "Miss Collins, Madame Delaney, welcome. We're honored to have you. Your suite is ready." Eloise turned to me, her eyes glistening. "They know our names." I smiled. "They should." Our suite was a dream made tangible, tall windows draped in cream velvet armchairs, a marble fireplace already glowing. The city stretched beyond the balcony, the Eiffel Tower rising like a promise through the mist. Eloise walked straight to the window, her fingertips grazing the glass. "I used to have a postcard of that," she murmured. "It hung by my vanity mirror for 40 years. Now you have the real thing," I said. She turned, her voice trembling with disbelief. "And you did all this for me?" "For us," I corrected. We unpacked slowly, deliberately. Eloise lined her pills on the bedside table as if arranging tiny pieces of control. I hung up her gray wool coat, smoothing the fabric the way she used to smooth my hair when I was a child. Every gesture felt like an undoing of years that had separated us, distance, silence, misunderstandings, stitched together by small kindnesses. When she found the new dress, waiting for her soft dove gray cashmere wrapped in tissue, she gasped. "Oh, Izzy, it's beautiful. It's for dinner tomorrow night," I said. "You're going to look incredible." She smiled, tracing the fabric with her fingers. "I haven't dressed up in years. Your mother always said I was too old for all that." I said nothing but the words carved deep. That evening, I ordered tea service to the room. A silver tray arrived, fine china cups, macarons, lemon tarts, so perfect they looked unreal. Eloise took a sip, her eyes closing. "I don't know what this tea is, but I might marry it." We both laughed. It felt good to laugh. Afterward, I set up the new phone I'd bought her, showing her the single icon on the screen with my face. "If you ever need me," I said, "you just press that." She tilted her head. "And you'll answer anywhere in the world," "Anywhere," I said. She nodded, impressed. Technology really is a kind of magic. Later, while she dozed on the sofa, I stood at the window watching the traffic swirl below. I thought about the people back home, the perfectly curated dinner table, the polished silver, the laughter they'd rehearsed for their in-laws. I imagined my mother's face when she realized I wasn't answering her calls. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang 6 times. It felt like a countdown to something inevitable. My phone buzzed again. Another message from my brother Nathan. "Mom's losing it. Just tell her you're safe." Then a second one followed. "She says you kidnapped Grandma." I almost laughed out loud. Kidnapped. The woman was sitting in a 5-star hotel suite, eating lemon tarts and planning which scarf matched her dress. I took a photo of her asleep on the sofa, her face serene in the golden light. I sent it to Nathan with one line. "Looks like she's suffering." Then I silenced my phone again. The next morning the sky was pale blue, and Paris felt like it had been freshly painted. We started early, bundled in coats and scarves. The hotel arranged a car to take us along the Seine. Eloise leaned against the window, naming things as if she were reacquainting herself with an old friend. The river, the bridges. "Oh, look at those balconies. They actually have flowers in winter." We stopped first at a small café tucked on a cobblestone street in Le Marais. The air inside was warm and smelled of butter and espresso. The waiter addressed us in French. I responded haltingly, earning a proud nod from Eloise. "You learned French for this enough to order croissants and champagne," I said. We sat by the window watching the city wake up. She ate her croissant, slowly savoring every bite like it was her first and last. "When I was young," she said, "I thought happiness had to be earned. Now I think it's just something you have to allow." I looked at her at the light, catching the silver strands in her hair. "Then let's allow it, Grandma." After breakfast, we visited the art museum. I'd arranged a private viewing of the Monet exhibit. When we entered the gallery, Eloise's breath caught. There it was, the painting from her postcard. The water lilies, the soft brushstrokes of light. She stepped closer, tears in her eyes. I never thought I'd see it with my own eyes. The curator stood respectfully behind us. "Take as much time as you like," he said. Eloise just stared at the canvas, her hand trembling, as she reached out not to touch, but to feel the air between her and the art she'd dreamed of for a lifetime. "It's like seeing my own memories," she whispered. I watched her in silence, realizing this trip was never really about revenge or proving a point. It was about restoration, about giving her back something the world and our family had taken. When we left the museum, the light had changed. The streets glowed gold and the chill in the air had softened. Eloise looped her arm through mine. "You know what I think?" "What I think? This is the first Christmas that actually feels like one." That night, I ordered dinner in the hotel's private salon, just the two of us. Candlelight flickered against the crystal glasses. A small string trio played near the fireplace. Eloise wore the gray dress, and I thought she had never looked more beautiful. Partway through dinner, she leaned closer. "Your mother called me last week before all this," she said. "She wanted to make sure I wasn't lonely. But I think what she really wanted was to make sure I didn't cause a scene." I raised an eyebrow. "Did she mention me?" "She said you'd been difficult lately." I laughed softly. "That's their favorite word for me." She nodded. "It's also what they call anyone who refuses to stay small." For a while, neither of us spoke. The violinist began playing something soft and melancholy, and Eloise smiled faintly. "You know," she said, "you remind me of myself. The younger version. The one who never got to be." I took her hand. "Maybe we're both getting another chance." She squeezed it gently. "Maybe we are." Later, when she went to bed, I sat alone on the balcony. The Eiffel Tower sparkled in the distance, the city murmuring below. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't my mother or brother. It was my Aunt Ruth. "Everyone's talking, Izzy. You've really stirred the pot. Your mom says you'll regret this." I stared at the message for a long time before replying. "Maybe. But not tonight." The night air was cold against my skin, but it felt good, real. I looked through the window at Eloise sleeping peacefully and realized something had shifted inside me. I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake. Somewhere far away, the phone on my nightstand blinked again. I ignored it. The next morning, I knew the real storm would begin. That night, as I drifted to sleep to the sound of Paris traffic below, I had no idea that by morning our quiet escape would become the headline of a family scandal thousands of miles away. The first messages came before breakfast. I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing across the marble nightstand, the screen lighting up again and again with the same names: Mom, Nathan, Aunt Ruth. I let it vibrate until the battery nearly died. The city outside our window was pale and quiet, the Eiffel Tower still ghostly in the morning mist. Eloise was already up, sitting by the window in her robe, sipping tea and reading the hotel's French newspaper upside down. "You're famous," I said, yawning. She looked up confused. "What do you mean?" I tossed her my phone. "Apparently word got out that we're not spending Christmas in Florida." Her eyes scanned the flood of messages, her brows lifting slightly. "They're panicking," she said. "Your mother says you abducted me." I poured myself coffee. Her words, not mine. Eloise chuckled, setting the phone down. "You know what this reminds me of? When I eloped with your grandfather, my father called the police. Did they find you?" "They didn't even look," she said, smiling. "He didn't really want me back. He just wanted control." Her voice softened as she looked back at the window. "Some people mistake control for love. Your mother's the same way." The knock at the door interrupted us. A young concierge stood there with a bouquet of fresh peonies. "Compliments of the hotel, Madame Delaney," he said. "And this was also delivered for you." He handed me an envelope sealed in gold foil. I frowned. "Who delivers mail to a hotel?" Eloise leaned forward, curious. "Open it." Inside was a crisp ivory card. "Miss Collins, please contact your family. They are worried." "The U.S. Embassy, Paris." I laughed, shaking my head. She actually called the embassy. Eloise smiled thinly. She always did like to escalate. I dropped the card on the table. "I'm not calling them." "No, Eloise," said her voice calm. "You're not." The rest of the morning unfolded like a film playing too slowly. We went down to the breakfast salon where waiters glided like dancers between tables. Eloise ordered pancakes, marveling that they were almost American but fancier. I watched her laugh with the waiter, the lines around her eyes softening her voice, full of the kind of joy I hadn't heard in years. For a moment I forgot there was a storm brewing across the ocean. When we returned to the suite, I checked my email mostly out of habit. Among the usual updates from my law firm and a few holiday sales, one message stood out: subject trust inquiry. Immediate response requested. It was from the law office that had managed the Delaney family trust for decades. I opened it carefully. "Miss Collins, your grandmother has contacted our office with requests to revise her estate documents. Before proceeding, we require your confirmation for coordination, as she has named you as primary consultant. Please advise availability for a virtual meeting within 24 hours." I turned to Eloise. "Grandma, what did you do?" She didn't even look surprised. "Oh, I made a few calls yesterday before dinner. It's time I cleaned up some old paperwork." "Cleaned up?" I repeated. She shrugged, folding her napkin neatly. "It's my money, darling. I might as well decide where it goes while I can still hold a pen." I sank into a chair. "You're changing the trust." "I'm updating it," she said. "And before you ask, no, I'm not doing it out of spite. I'm doing it because I finally see clearly who's earned my faith and who hasn't." Her tone was steady, but there was an undercurrent of steel in it. "Grandma, you know they're going to lose their minds." She smiled faintly. "Then let them. Perhaps losing their minds will help them find their conscience." That afternoon, while she napped, I joined the video call with the law firm. The lead attorney, a silver-haired man named Mr. Wainwright, greeted me politely. "Miss Collins, I understand you're in Paris with Mrs. Delaney. She has requested several amendments. I'd like to confirm your understanding before proceeding." "I understand perfectly," I said. He adjusted his glasses. "One of the proposed changes includes designating you as successor trustee. That would transfer fiduciary control upon her passing." I nodded slowly. "She's aware of the implications fully," he said. And I might add she was quite specific about her reasons. Her words were, and I quote, "I prefer the family realist to the family performer." I couldn't help but smile. That sounds like her. By the time Eloise woke, the legal documents had been drafted. She read every word, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. When she finished, she signed them without hesitation. "Done," she said. "And you'll keep copies, of course." "I already have," I said, scanning the PDFs into my encrypted drive. She leaned back in her chair. "Good. Now let's have tea. I feel lighter already." That evening I took her out for a walk along the Champs-Élysées. The city glowed with holiday lights, strings of gold and white swaying gently in the cold breeze. Eloise clutched my arm, her eyes darting from one glittering display to another. "Your mother would hate this," she said suddenly. "Why? Because it's not her idea," she replied, laughing. Her laughter was contagious. We stopped at a small chocolatier's window where truffles sat in rows like jewels. I bought a box, and she insisted we eat two right there on the sidewalk. "Best rebellion I've ever tasted," she said. We returned to the hotel to find a voicemail waiting. The front desk clerk handed it to me on a written note. "Miss Collins, a woman called claiming to be your mother. She asked for your room number. We did not provide it." Eloise chuckled when I read it out loud. "They think they can track you down in Paris. They're trying," I said, pulling out my phone. "Maybe I should post something just to make it easier." "What do you mean?" I opened the camera app, flipped it to selfie mode, and framed us with the city lights behind the window. "Smile, Grandma." She grinned, lifting her glass of champagne. I took the photo, added a caption, and posted it to my private family group chat to Peace, Freedom, and Good Taste. Within a minute, the typing bubbles appeared. Then came the messages, furious, confused, incredulous. "Where are you? This isn't funny, Izzy. You're embarrassing the family. Bring Grandma home." I showed the screen to Eloise. She studied it for a moment, then said simply, "They always confuse embarrassment with exposure." I laughed softly. "What do you mean?" "They think keeping secrets makes them respectable, but sometimes shining a little light is the only way to make people see." The clock on the mantel chimed 9. I closed my phone and poured her another glass of champagne. "To shining light, then," I said. She clinked her glass against mine, and to letting them squint. Later that night I couldn't sleep. The adrenaline of defiance kept me awake. I sat on the balcony watching the city hum. Somewhere far away, my family was unraveling, their carefully built narrative falling apart. But here, in this golden cocoon above the streets of Paris, everything felt balanced. When I finally went back inside, Eloise was awake too. She was sitting in bed, her reading lamp glowing softly. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked. She looked up, smiling faintly. "No, I was just thinking. I've waited a long time for this kind of peace. Funny, isn't it? You have to leave everything behind to find it." I sat beside her. "You're not leaving everything, Grandma. You're just choosing differently." She nodded slowly. "Then I choose this." Outside, the bells of the city began to toll deep and slow. Midnight, Christmas Eve. Eloise leaned back against her pillows. "Merry Christmas, Izzy." "Merry Christmas, Grandma," I whispered. As the lights of Paris flickered against her face, I realized something. The fight wasn't just about exclusion anymore. It was about inheritance, yes, but not the financial kind. It was about legacy. And for the first time, it was ours to define. By the time the first snow began to fall over Paris, I thought the chaos might finally quiet down, but I was wrong. Back home, the real storm was only just beginning. By Christmas morning, my phone was a war zone. Notifications poured in like artillery fire, missed calls, voicemails, long texts full of guilt and accusation. The family group chat had mutated overnight into a courtroom, and I was the defendant. My mother's messages came first. "You've humiliated us, Isabella. Taking your grandmother away on Christmas Eve? Do you even realize what people are saying?" Then Nathan, more measured, but just as patronizing. Mom's in tears. Dad's furious. "This isn't you. You're better than this." I read them while sitting on the balcony in my robe, a cup of coffee steaming in the cold air. Eloise was still asleep, breathing softly in the next room. The sky over Paris was silver, the streets below quiet, as if the whole city were holding its breath. I didn't reply to a single message. Instead, I opened my camera and took a picture of the skyline. The Eiffel Tower shimmered faintly through the morning fog. I posted it with no caption. Within minutes, my cousin Lindsay commented with a series of exclamation marks. Another cousin wrote, "So this is what being too busy for family looks like." I locked the phone, set it aside, and whispered to the city, "Let them talk." When Eloise woke, she looked refreshed and oddly serene. "Did I sleep through Christmas?" she asked. I smiled. "No, Grandma. It's just beginning." We had breakfast, sent up croissants, berries, eggs, cooked exactly the way she liked. While she ate, she asked what my plans were for the day. I hesitated before answering. I thought we might visit the bridge across the Seine, the one in all those paintings. "And later there's somewhere I want to take you." She raised an eyebrow. "Somewhere mysterious. Somewhere important," I said. The concierge had arranged a car for us again. When we stepped outside, the air smelled like rain and wood smoke. Eloise wore her gray dress with a wool shawl, her posture proud, her eyes sharp. As we drove through the narrow streets, she turned to me. "You've been quiet this morning," she said. "Something's on your mind." I glanced out the window. "They're angry." "Who, my parents? Nathan? The whole committee back home?" Eloise chuckled. "Of course they are. You've upset the choreography. They built their world around performance, and now you've changed the stage lighting." "I didn't mean to start a war," I said softly. "Sweetheart," she replied, "you didn't start it. You just stopped pretending it wasn't happening." Her words settled into me like truth I'd always known. We crossed the river. The Seine shimmered under a blanket of pale sunlight. The bridge was quiet except for the occasional tourist. Eloise walked slowly to the middle, resting her hands on the cold railing. "You know," she said, "when I was your age, I used to dream of standing right here. I even saved money for the trip once." "What happened?" I asked, though I already knew. She smiled sadly. "Life happened. Then your mother happened. Then Mark, your uncle, and all the rest. There was always something more urgent than my dreams." I slipped my arm through hers. "Then let's fix that." She nodded, looking out at the water. "It's strange. The longer you live, the more you realize that love without respect feels a lot like captivity." Her words hit me hard. When we returned to the hotel, something unexpected was waiting. The concierge handed me a small package and a note. From the United States consulate, it read. Inside was a sealed envelope with my name typed in bold. I opened it to find a printed message. "Miss Collins, please contact your family. They have filed a welfare concern with U.S. authorities regarding your grandmother's safety." Eloise's laughter rang through the marble lobby when she read it. "They think I'm being held hostage," she said. "I haven't had this much fun in years." The absurdity of it all made me laugh too, though a part of me knew it wasn't really funny. It was control disguised as concern. It always had been. Upstairs, Eloise rested while I answered a few work emails. Then impulsively I opened the family group chat again. The messages were still coming. My mother had written an essay-length text about family values and public image. My father added a line about reputation. Nathan wrote, "Mom says you're making Grandma do things that aren't good for her health. She's 80, Izzy. Be reasonable." I took a deep breath and typed one message. "She's 80, Nathan, not invisible." Then I put the phone away for good. That afternoon, we went to the small jewelry boutique I had found online the night before. The owner, a woman in her 60s with dark hair pinned elegantly back, greeted us warmly. "Ah, yes, the custom order," she said when she saw me. She disappeared into the back and returned with a velvet box. Inside was a delicate gold bracelet engraved on the inside with the words, "Freedom has no age." Eloise gasped softly. "Oh, Izzy!" I clasped it around her wrist. "It's not just jewelry, it's a declaration." Her hand trembled slightly as she touched the engraving. You always did know how to make a statement without saying a word. When we left the boutique, she insisted on walking even though the wind had picked up. We wandered through the Christmas market's rows of glowing stalls, selling candles, scarves, and pastries dusted with sugar. Children chased each other between stands. The sound of carolers drifted through the air. For a few precious minutes, we were just two women in a city that didn't care who we'd been before. But as dusk settled, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a text. It was a video call. My mother. Eloise saw the name flash across the screen. "Answer it," she said. I frowned. Why? Because it's time they see the truth for themselves. I hesitated, then tapped accept. My mother's face filled the screen tight, furious, the kind of expression she wore when she thought appearances were slipping. "Isabella," she snapped. "Where are you? What are you doing?" "We've had to call lawyers to make sure Grandma isn't being exploited." "Good evening to you too, Mother," I said coolly. "We're having a lovely Christmas, thank you." "Lovely," she repeated, incredulous. "You've turned our family into a spectacle. Your cousins are gossiping, your father's humiliated." "Then maybe you shouldn't have left me off the guest list," I said. Her mouth opened, then closed. "That's not the point." "It's exactly the point," I replied. "You didn't want me there because I didn't fit your perfect picture. You thought if you erased me from Christmas, I'd just disappear quietly." Eloise stepped into the frame, her posture regal. "Carol," she said, her voice calm, "but cutting your daughter didn't erase anyone. She gave me the best Christmas of my life. I'm safe, I'm happy, and for once I'm being treated like I matter." My mother's eyes widened. "Mother, what are you saying?" "I'm saying," Eloise replied, "that I raised one daughter with courage and she's standing right next to me." For a moment the screen went silent. My father appeared behind my mother, his voice deep and tight. "Evelyn, this isn't you. Leah's manipulating you." "My name's Isabella," I said sharply. He ignored me. "We can sort this out when you come home. There's still time to undo this mess." Eloise smiled faintly. "I'm not coming home. At least not to that home." "Mom, please," my mother began. But Eloise lifted her hand. "You'll receive a call from my attorney in the morning," she said. "Merry Christmas." And with that, she ended the call. I stared at her, stunned. "Grandma, what was that?" "Phase 1, she said, smiling. "Now finish your champagne. We have work to do." That night, while the rest of the world celebrated, we sat side by side at the window, the Eiffel Tower glittering in the distance. She told me stories I'd never heard, of her first love, of sacrifices she'd made, of the quiet ache of always being second to someone else's comfort. And when she finally fell asleep, her hand resting gently over mine, I understood that what we had done wasn't rebellion. It was reclamation. The phone on the table buzzed one last time. I ignored it. Let them stew in their own silence. Outside, Paris shimmered alive, defiant, free. That night, after Grandma ended the call with a calm that could silence thunder, I knew something irreversible had begun, and by morning her next move would change everything. The morning after Christmas, Paris felt different, still beautiful but sharper, like the city itself was holding its breath. The sun cut across the rooftops, turning every window into a blade of light. Eloise was already awake when I came out of my room, dressed in her robe, reading glasses perched on her nose, a cup of coffee steaming beside her. She looked almost too calm. "I was wondering when you'd get up," she said. "The lawyer called." I froze halfway to the table. "Which lawyer?" "Mr. Wainwright. He's ready to finalize the trust amendments today." She said it like she was talking about grocery shopping. "Today, yes. He's sending a Paris-based associate to handle the paperwork." She smiled faintly. "It's a good day for housekeeping." I sat across from her, still half asleep, trying to process the weight of what she'd just said. "Grandma, once you sign those papers, there's no undoing it. Mom and Nathan will go ballistic." She took a slow sip of coffee. "They already have. Why waste a good tantrum?" Her voice was calm, but there was a glint of steel in her eyes. I realized then that this wasn't a spontaneous decision. She'd planned this long before Paris, maybe even long before I ever texted her about the trip. A knock at the door interrupted us. The concierge again carrying a small folder embossed with gold lettering. "Madame Delaney, this arrived from the notary," he said. "And there's also a video message attached to the delivery for Miss Collins." "Mercy," I said, taking the envelope. He bowed slightly and left. Eloise motioned toward the folder. "Open it." Inside were the legal documents, formal heavy with signatures, stamps, and seals, and a note clipped to the top virtual witness session scheduled for 5 p.m. Paris time. The video message was from Mr. Wainwright himself. "Good morning, Miss Collins. Your grandmother has expressed absolute clarity regarding her decisions. As requested, I've included the amendments to designate you as successor trustee and establish the Delaney Foundation for Women in Technology. A representative from our French partner firm will arrive shortly to notarize. Please ensure your grandmother reviews the final version in full." I played the video twice just to be sure I hadn't imagined it. "You're starting a foundation," Eloise smiled. "You inspired it." I blinked. "Me you," she said. "You took what the world threw away and built something from it. That deserves to live on." I didn't know what to say. We spent the day walking along the river, though neither of us really saw the sights. The conversations drifted from small talk to memory, and back again. She told me about her own mother, a woman I'd never met who had lived her life quietly behind other people's dreams. "She was brilliant," Eloise said, watching the water. "But she never had the luxury of being seen." "She would have liked you," I said. Eloise smiled. "She would have liked you more." By the time we returned to the hotel, the light was fading. The lawyer's representative was already waiting in the lobby, a polished man in a dark gray suit, holding a leather briefcase. "Madame Delaney, Miss Collins," he said, bowing slightly. "I am Monsieur Arnaud, from Wainwright and Frères. We are ready when you are." Eloise gestured for him to follow us upstairs. The suite suddenly felt smaller once the paperwork was laid out. The air thickened with formality. Arnaud explained every clause carefully in English, his voice even and professional. When he finished, he turned to Eloise. "Madam, do you understand the terms of this amendment?" Eloise adjusted her glasses, her expression sharp. "I do. My assets will fund the Delaney Foundation immediately upon my passing. My granddaughter Isabella Collins will serve as executive director and trustee. All prior trustees are to be removed, and any beneficiary who disputes this arrangement forfeits their claim." Arnaud nodded, satisfied. "Then if you agree, please sign here." Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for the pen, not from hesitation but from age. I watched her write her name, each letter slow, deliberate, final. When she finished, she handed the pen to Arnaud. He checked the signatures, stamped the final page, and looked up. "Congratulations, madam. It is done." For a long moment, Eloise didn't speak. She just stared at the signed document, then leaned back in her chair. "Funny," she said. "It feels like breathing again." I walked her to the balcony afterward. The city glowed below us, gold and silver. She exhaled slowly. "Do you think they'll understand?" "No," I said. "But they'll have to live with it." She nodded, a faint smile curving her lips. "Then, that's enough." Later that evening, I ordered room service, a bottle of champagne, and 2 slices of chocolate tart. We sat at the small dining table, the paperwork neatly stacked beside us. She poured the champagne herself, her hand steady now. "To new beginnings," she said, raising her glass. "To peace," I added. We clinked glasses, the sound bright and clear. But peace, I was learning, rarely comes quietly. Halfway through dessert, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a message or call, it was a video notification from my cousin Lindsay's social media account. The thumbnail made my stomach drop. It was a screenshot of the photo I'd posted 2 days earlier, Eloise, and me in front of the Eiffel Tower. Above it, Lindsay had written, "Guess who skipped family Christmas to live their best life in Paris." The post had hundreds of comments already. Some were harmless, others vicious. "Must be nice when you don't have to work for it. Isn't that grandma's money?" "Ungrateful much." My mother had even left a comment. Family isn't about showing off online, Isabella. I closed the app and set the phone down, my pulse pounding. Eloise watched me quietly. They're talking, aren't they? I nodded. They always are. She sipped her champagne. Let them. Gossip is just free advertising for the truth. Her calm was almost unnerving but comforting too. You're not angry, I asked. Oh, I am, she said, smiling faintly. But anger is only useful when you aim it correctly. Her words hung in the air like a spark. We finished dessert in silence, the glow from the city washing over us. Eloise leaned back in her chair, her bracelet glinting in the candlelight. You know, she said softly, I think I was waiting for this moment my whole life. The moment I stopped apologizing for being inconvenient. I looked at her, the woman everyone had underestimated, written off, ignored. You've never been inconvenient, Grandma. You've just been extraordinary in a room full of people who didn't notice. Her eyes shimmered, but she didn't look away, and now they will. When she finally went to bed, I stayed up alone. I opened my laptop and drafted an email to Mr. Wainwright. Subject: Next steps for foundation activation. I listed the documents, the contact information for the U.S. office, and the date for formal registration. Then, almost as an afterthought, I attached one of the photos from that afternoon, Eloise signing the papers, her hand firm, her expression radiant. Before hitting send, I added one last line. Thank you for helping her make history. Outside, the wind carried the faint sound of church bells. Somewhere down the street, someone laughed. I closed my laptop and looked out at Paris, the city that had become our witness. Tomorrow, I knew the storm back home would reach its peak. But for tonight, it was just us two women who had stopped asking for permission to exist. That night, as I sent the final email confirming the Foundation's activation, I had no idea that by dawn, our quiet victory in Paris would ignite a scandal powerful enough to shake the entire Delaney family back home. By the time the sun climbed over the rooftops of Paris the next morning, the fallout had already begun. My phone was filled with notifications, articles, tagged posts, even a few emails from journalists. Someone in the family, probably Lindsay, had leaked the news about the trust amendment. The headline glared up at me from my screen: heiress granddaughter named sole trustee in Delaney family estate, shake up. I stared at it for a long time, the words blurring slightly. Eloise walked into the room, tying her silk robe around her waist. What's that look for? She asked, pouring herself coffee. They know, I said. Her eyebrows rose slightly. Of course they do. Good news travels fast when it's bad for someone else. I turned the phone so she could see. They made it public, Grandma. This isn't just family gossip anymore. It's on the internet. Eloise took a sip of her coffee, utterly unbothered. Then let the internet have its fun. I've lived long enough to know that truth and outrage have the same shelf life, about 3 days. But they'll call it manipulation, I said. They'll say I forced you. She cut me off with a quiet laugh. They can say what they like. I wasn't coerced. I was finally awake. Her calm steadiness was infuriating and inspiring all at once. I admired it even as I felt the anxiety rise in my chest. The phone buzzed again. This time it was a video call request. My mother. The timing was too precise to be a coincidence. She's not going to stop, I muttered. Answer it, Eloise said. I hesitated. She'll just twist this around, make it sound like I've poisoned you. Eloise looked at me, her expression firm. Then let her speak. But remember, you don't owe her an explanation, I answered. My mother's face filled the screen, her voice already trembling with accusation. Isabella, what in God's name have you done? Do you have any idea what this means for our family? Good morning to you too, Mother, I said flatly. You've made us look like fools, she continued. People are calling, asking questions. Your father is furious. You've humiliated him in front of his colleagues. What kind of daughter does that? The kind who was never invited to Christmas, I said. Her lips tightened. Oh, for heaven's sake, stop dramatizing. Stop pretending, I interrupted. You cut me out. You said it was about space, but it wasn't. You didn't want me there because I didn't fit your picture of a perfect family. Now you don't get to complain that your perfect image cracked." For a moment she didn't speak. Then quietly, "Is this about money, Isabella? Is that what this is?" "No," I said, my voice low and even. "This is about respect. Something I learned to live without for far too long." Eloise moved into the frame beside me, her presence like a shield. "Carol," she said, her voice smooth as glass, "I suggest you stop assuming that everything in this world belongs to you. My assets, my decisions, my legacy, they are mine to give, and I have chosen where they go." My mother's eyes widened. "Mother, you're being reckless. You're letting her manipulate you." "Manipulate?" Eloise laughed softly. "If only you knew how much strength it takes to stop being manipulated." Before my mother could respond, Eloise ended the call with one tap. The screen went black. The silence afterward was thick and electric. "I think that went well," Eloise said dryly. I let out a shaky breath. "You realize she's probably calling lawyers right now." "Good," she said, smiling faintly. "That'll give Wainwright something to do." The rest of the morning passed in uneasy quiet. I tried reading the paper, but my mind kept spinning. I could practically feel the ripple of outrage crossing the Atlantic, spreading through cousins, uncles, second cousins, the entire Delaney web unraveling one thread at a time. Just after noon, the hotel phone rang. The front desk clerk's voice was polite but nervous. "Miss Collins, I have a call from a Mr. Harrison, the Delaney Trust Administrator. He says it's urgent. Put him through," I said, though my stomach clenched. "Miss Collins," Mr. Harrison's voice came formal and hesitant. "I'm calling to inform you that your grandmother's new directives have already been challenged. Your mother and uncle have filed an intent to dispute the amendments." Eloise rolled her eyes. "Of course they have." However, Harrison continued, "The documents were properly executed and notarized under French jurisdiction, witnessed by both our firm and a licensed notary. Legally, they have little ground." "Meaning?" I asked. "Meaning they can scream all they like," he said carefully, "but they can't reverse what's done." Eloise smiled. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison. I'll be sending you a Christmas bonus for putting up with their nonsense." When the call ended, she turned to me. "Well, darling, it appears the revolution has begun." The phrase made me laugh despite myself. "You sound like you've been waiting for this." "Maybe I have," she said. "A lifetime of being told to be quiet prepares you well for the moment you finally speak." That afternoon we decided to get some air. The sky had cleared after a light rain, the streets glistening like glass. We walked through the Tuileries gardens, past bare winter trees, and small groups of tourists taking photos. Eloise walked slowly, her hand looped through my arm. "You know what they'll never understand," she said softly, "that this isn't revenge, it's justice." "Sometimes I can't tell the difference," I admitted. She smiled. "Justice feels lighter. Revenge leaves you hollow. You'll know the difference in your bones." I thought about that as we reached the fountain in the center of the garden. A young couple stood nearby, laughing, tossing bits of bread to pigeons. Eloise watched them for a long moment. "I used to think success meant being admired," she said. "Now I think it just means being free from people's opinions." I nodded, realizing she was right. Back at the hotel, another message was waiting. This time it wasn't my mother or the trust lawyer, it was Nathan. His tone was different. "Izzy, please call me. Mom's a mess. Dad's furious. They're saying you and Grandma are ruining the family. I just want to understand." I stared at it for a long time. There had been a time when I might have wanted him to understand, when I would have tried to explain everything, to fix it to be heard. That time was gone. Still, I typed back one message: "You can't ruin what was already broken." That evening, Eloise insisted we have dinner downstairs in the hotel's grand dining room. The chandeliers sparkled like constellations, the room humming with quiet elegance. She ordered duck confit and a glass of Bordeaux, declaring it the most sinful combination imaginable. Halfway through the meal, a hotel staff member approached our table holding a small tablet. "Madame Delaney, there's a video call request for you." From your attorney. Eloise accepted it immediately. Mr. Wainwright appeared on the screen, smiling faintly. Madame Miss Collins, I wanted to inform you that the revised trust documents have officially been recorded. The Delaney Foundation is now a recognized charitable entity. Eloise's smile deepened. Perfect timing, Mr. Wainwright. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas indeed, he said. And if I may add, it's an honor to witness history. When the call ended, Eloise raised her glass to me. To freedom, dear girl, the kind you can't buy or inherit, only earn, I lifted mine. To you, Grandma. The bravest woman I know. She tilted her head. Bravery's just stubbornness with better shoes. We both laughed. The sound carried through the restaurant bright and clear. That night as I tucked her into bed, she looked at me with that same steady gaze. You know, Isabella, what they'll never grasp is that all I ever wanted was peace for this family. I just finally realized I had to remove the poison to find it. I sat beside her, brushing a stray hair from her face. You did the right thing, Grandma. She smiled faintly. So did you. Outside Paris glittered beneath the full moon, the streets alive with light. But inside that room, for the first time in years, everything was still. And yet deep down, I knew the silence wouldn't last. The next call would come soon, and it wouldn't just be words this time. It would be war. That night, as Paris slept and the headlines spread back home, I knew it was only a matter of time before my parents stopped hiding behind phone calls and showed up in person to reclaim the control they'd just lost. The call came just after noon. I was sitting by the window reading through the Foundation's first draft proposal when my phone began to vibrate again and again. Not my mother this time, Nathan. The tone of his messages was different, urgent but not hostile. Izzy, please pick up. Mom's not okay. Dad says you've gone too far. We need to talk. I didn't answer. I knew how this game worked. First came the guilt, then the fear, then the offer to make peace that always meant surrender. Eloise was in the sitting room wrapped in her shawl, watching the city with a quiet smile. They're circling, aren't they? She asked, without turning around. They're panicking, I said. Nathan says Mom's unwell. She's not unwell, Eloise said flatly. She's unbalanced. There's a difference. I laughed, even though I shouldn't have. You're savage. I'm old, she corrected. The filter dies first. Before I could respond, the hotel phone rang. The concierge's polite voice floated through the receiver. Miss Collins, there is a Mr. and Mrs. Delaney requesting to see you in the lobby. My blood went cold. They're here, yes, ma'am. They've just arrived from the airport. I hung up, my pulse thudding. Eloise turned toward me, calm as ever. Well, she said, rising from her chair, it seems Christmas came late this year. They actually flew here, I said. They must have found out where we were staying. Let them come, she said simply. We'll hear their performance. Then we'll decide whether to applaud. I wanted to refuse to tell the concierge to turn them away, but something inside me, some quiet, defiant part, wanted to see this through. I'll meet them, I said. Eloise nodded. Not alone. The elevator ride to the lobby felt like descending into a courtroom. The doors opened onto a scene I would never forget, my parents standing near the Christmas tree, looking utterly out of place among the polished marble and golden garlands. My father's jaw was set tight. My mother's face was pale, her eyes swollen from crying or pretending to. Isabella, she said, as soon as she saw me, her voice trembling. What have you done? I stayed still, enjoying my holiday, mother. What brings you to Paris? Don't play coy, my father snapped. You know damn well why we're here. You've made a mockery of this family. Behind me, Eloise's cane clicked against the marble as she approached. The sound alone silenced them. David, she said coolly, Carol, you've both traveled far. Sit before you embarrass yourselves further. My father's nostrils flared. Mother, this isn't a joke. Do you even understand what you've signed? Do you know what she's done to you? Eloise lifted an eyebrow. I'm 81, David, not senile. What she's done is remind me who I raised and who I tolerated. My mother stepped forward, her voice quivering with desperation. Mom, please, we can fix this. You don't have to. Eloise cut her off with a raised hand. Don't beg for something you never earned. You've all been dining on my generosity for decades, mistaking inheritance for love. Consider the meal over. I had seen my mother angry before, but never like this. Her voice turned sharp, trembling with fury. You've poisoned her, Isabella. You've turned her against her own family. What kind of granddaughter does this? The kind who finally stopped apologizing, I said quietly. My father pointed at me, his face red. This isn't over. I'll contest it, every penny, every clause. I'll take you to court if I have to. Eloise laughed softly. You can try, but read the documents first. I made sure the forfeiture clause was ironclad. The moment you disparage or sue, you lose everything. He blinked, speechless. My mother's face turned ashen. Eloise stepped closer, her eyes sharp as glass. You wanted control, David. But control without compassion is tyranny. And I'm too old to live under tyrants. For a long time, no one spoke. The tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. Finally, my father straightened his coat. Fine. You win, he said, his voice cold. But don't expect us to come crawling back when this all falls apart. Eloise smiled faintly. I won't. Crawling never suited you. He turned and stormed out through the glass doors. My mother stood frozen, her eyes fixed on me. You've destroyed us, she whispered. No, I said softly. You destroyed yourself the moment you decided love was conditional. She turned away, following my father out into the cold. The lobby fell silent. The only sound was the faint crackle of the fire. Eloise exhaled slowly, leaning on her cane. Well, she said, that went about as I expected. You're shaking, I said, moving closer. With satisfaction, she replied, smiling faintly. Let's go upstairs. I need a drink. Back in the suite, the tension dissolved into exhaustion. Eloise sank into the armchair by the window. I poured her a small glass of sherry. Do you regret it? I asked. She sipped slowly, considering. I regret waiting this long, she said. I regret all the years I mistook silence for peace. Her words landed heavy in the quiet room. I thought about my own life, the times I had swallowed my pain, the years I had tried to earn their love through success, through restraint, through disappearing when they needed space. Silence wasn't peace, it was suffocation. I sat down beside her. You know they'll come after me next. She looked at me with a mix of pride and warning. Let them. You have truth on your side, and the truth, when spoken clearly, terrifies people who live on illusion. That night, I received an email from Mr. Wainwright confirming that the Paris notarization was complete and logged. The foundation was now active beyond the reach of any family litigation. It was done. But the messages kept coming. My mother left a voicemail, her voice breaking midway through. You think you've won, Isabella, but all you've done is isolate yourself. When the applause fades, you'll be alone. I deleted it without listening to the end. The next morning, Eloise woke early and asked to see the Eiffel Tower one last time before we left. We stood together at dawn, the tower glowing gold against the pale sky. She took my hand. You know, my father used to say that family is a mirror. Sometimes it shows you your best self. Sometimes, if you're unlucky, it shows you who you refuse to become. I squeezed her hand gently. So what do you see now? She smiled. A woman who finally stopped living in other people's reflections. We stood there until the city came to life. The traffic, the sound of church bells, the quiet hum of morning. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. The war was over. Later that day, as we packed our bags, I found a handwritten note on the desk in Eloise's looping script. For Isabella, some battles aren't meant to be won. They're meant to be remembered, so no one ever forgets what silence cost us. I folded it carefully, slipped it into my coat pocket, and looked out the window one last time. Paris shimmered beneath the winter sun, alive and mercifully indifferent. It felt like the beginning of something new. That night, as the city lights flickered across the Seine, I knew my parents' departure wasn't the end of the story, only the silence before their next desperate move. The following morning felt unnaturally still. Paris had the quiet of a Sunday, though it was Monday and the air hung heavy waiting. I made tea for Eloise, careful not to wake her too soon. Her face, softened by sleep, looked years younger. She'd earned the rest. I hadn't. The adrenaline from yesterday still burned under my skin. The confrontation in the lobby kept replaying in my head. My mother's trembling voice, my father's rage, the way Eloise had faced them like a queen in exile who'd finally come home to her own throne. By the time she woke, the winter sun had crept high, painting the walls in soft gold. "You're up early," she said. "I don't think I slept," I admitted. "Good," she said, stretching carefully. "You'll be awake for the next act." "The next act," she smiled faintly. "You didn't think they'd give up that easily, did you?" I frowned. "I thought the legal side was done." "It is," she said, pouring her tea. "But this family never stops when the law gets in their way. They'll try something else. Guilt, sympathy, maybe public humiliation." She stirred her cup. "People who live on power can't stand being powerless." Her prediction was prophetic. At noon, my phone buzzed with a notification. Someone had tagged me in a video. It was a clip of my mother standing outside an airport, visibly upset, giving an interview to a local news channel. The headline read, "Family Rift Over Inheritance. Elderly Matriarch Taken Abroad by Granddaughter." The reporter's voice was too cheerful for the subject. "Carol Delaney, can you tell us what happened?" My mother dabbed at imaginary tears. "I just want to make sure my mother is safe. She's old and confused, and my daughter, well, she's always been intense. We're just worried about her state of mind." I stopped watching. The air left my lungs in a rush. Eloise looked up from her crossword. "They've gone public, haven't they?" "Nationally," I said. "She's playing the victim." "Of course she is," Eloise said. "It's her favorite role." I sat beside her, feeling both furious and hollow. "They're going to make people think I kidnapped you." She patted my hand. "Let them think. The truth doesn't need defending. It just needs patience." But patience felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. My phone was already lighting up again, messages from colleagues, acquaintances, even strangers. Some were sympathetic, others cruel. "You should be ashamed. Gold digger. She raised you, and this is how you repay her." I wanted to throw the phone across the room. Instead, I opened my laptop and logged into the Foundation's new email account. A flood of welcome messages from women in STEM programs filled the inbox. Students, professors, engineers, people who had read about the Delaney Foundation's launch in the same articles that mocked me. Their words were short but powerful. "Thank you. This gives me hope. My grandmother would have loved this." Eloise watched me read. "There," she said quietly. "That's the real story." That afternoon we decided to go out. It was cold, the sky, a soft gray snow, threatening but not yet falling. We walked through the streets near the Louvre, our scarves pulled tight. Eloise was slower today. She paused often to catch her breath. "Don't worry," she said each time. "I'm not fading, just savoring." We stopped at a cafe with an awning striped in green and white. The waiter recognized us from a few days before and greeted Eloise like an old friend. He brought her hot chocolate and a croissant so fresh it melted at the touch. She closed her eyes after the first sip. "Perfection," she whispered. For a few minutes we were just two people sitting in the soft hum of a Paris afternoon. Then my phone rang again. It was Nathan. I almost ignored it, but Eloise placed her hand over mine. "Answer it," she said. "It's time." I swiped to accept. Isabella. Nathan's voice was quiet, shaky. "I had to call. Mom's. She's gone too far. She's on the news calling me a kidnapper," I said. "I know," he sighed. "I tried to stop her, but Dad's furious. They're saying Grandma's lost it, that you've manipulated her. I don't know what to do anymore." For a moment I said nothing. Nathan had always been the peacekeeper, the golden boy who never chose sides because he never had to. Now I could hear the crack in his certainty. You can start, I said finally, by telling the truth. He hesitated. They'll hate me for it. They already do in their own way, I said. But you'll sleep better. He didn't argue. Instead, he said something I hadn't expected. Grandma was right. You are intense, but maybe that's not such a bad thing. The line went quiet, then ended. I put the phone down and met Eloise's gaze. He's scared, I said. Good, she replied. Fear is the first crack in denial. That night, the city turned to crystal. Snow finally began to fall, catching in the glow of streetlights. Eloise and I stood by the window watching it drift past. The noise from the street below, a violin, laughter, a car horn, faded into a kind of music. I'm sorry this got ugly, I said quietly. I didn't mean to drag you into a war. She smiled, her reflection shimmering beside mine. Oh, my dear, this war started long before you were born. I'm just glad you're the one who ended it. The next morning I found her sitting at the desk writing on hotel stationery. Her handwriting, though a little shaky, was still beautiful. She folded the paper, slipped it into an envelope, and sealed it with a careful press of her thumb. What's that? I asked. A letter, she said. For after. I wanted to ask after what, but her expression told me not to. Later that day, the hotel manager knocked on the door to deliver a message. Madame Delaney, he said, there's a video call request from the United States. A family conference, I believe. Eloise smiled faintly. Perfect. Set it up for 8 o'clock this evening. The manager hesitated. Shall I prepare the salon? Yes, I said before she could answer, and send up the good champagne. He nodded, bowing slightly. When the door closed, I looked at her. You're planning something, she smirked. I'm planning a finale. By sunset, the salon was ready. The table was set with silver and candles, the Paris skyline glowing beyond the windows. Eloise sat at the head of the table in her gray dress, her pearls glinting softly in the light. I sat beside her, a glass of champagne untouched before me. The screen on the wall flickered to life. My parents appeared first, sitting in their living room in Florida. My father's expression was grim, my mother's face carefully composed. Nathan was there too, sitting off to the side, looking tired. Eloise leaned forward slightly, her voice crisp. Good evening, everyone. My mother forced a smile. Mother, thank you for agreeing to this call. We just want to find a way to move forward. Eloise raised her glass. So do I. That's why I'd like you all to listen before you speak. The silence that followed was thick. She began slowly recounting everything, the exclusion from Christmas, the years of small humiliations, the truth of what had really happened. Her voice never wavered. My mother's eyes filled with tears. My father looked away. Nathan stared at the floor. When she finished, she said quietly, You called me confused. I'm not confused. I'm clear. I know exactly what I'm doing with my money and my name. I'm building something real, something that outlives our dysfunction. Then she looked at me. Isabella, would you show them? I opened my laptop, sharing my screen. The foundation's homepage filled the display, the Delaney Foundation for Women in Technology. Under it, a photo of Eloise smiling in front of the Eiffel Tower. Below that, a line she'd written herself, No one shall be defined by their exclusion from a family table. My mother covered her mouth. My father's voice cracked. Evelyn, please. But Eloise raised a hand. No, David. For once in your life, let silence mean respect. The room on their end fell silent. The call ended not with shouting, but with a long, hollow quiet. When it was over, Eloise exhaled. Well, she said softly, that's the last family meeting I'll ever attend. I poured her another glass of champagne. She raised it, eyes bright. To freedom, my dear. Hard won and beautifully kept. And when our glasses met, I felt the weight of generations lift. That night, after the final call ended and the room fell into silence, I watched Eloise staring out at the Paris skyline, her reflection framed by candlelight, and I realized she wasn't just closing a chapter, she was preparing to end the story, on her own terms. The next morning, Paris was quiet again, almost reverent, as if the city itself knew something sacred had ended. I woke to find Eloise sitting by the window in her robe, her eyes lost somewhere beyond the rooftops. A half-written postcard sat on the table beside her, one she'd bought the day before at the museum gift shop. She was writing to no one in particular. "I don't want to leave," she said softly. "You don't have to yet," I replied. "The flight's not until tomorrow." She smiled faintly. "That's not what I meant." For a moment I didn't understand. Then I did. A chill passed through me. "Grandma," I said, moving closer. "Don't talk like that." She reached for my hand, her fingers cool but steady. "Izzy, everything I wanted to say has been said. Everything I needed to do, I've done. I've watched you stand taller than anyone ever allowed me to, and that's enough." I sat on the edge of the chair next to her, trying to hide the tremor in my voice. "You're just tired. You need rest." She looked at me with the softest smile, the one I'd known all my life. "Rest is exactly what I need." Outside, the church bells began to ring slow and solemn. Paris was beginning its morning prayers. Later after breakfast, we walked to the bridge one last time. Eloise insisted on wearing her gray coat even though the air was sharp and cold. The city was almost empty, just us, the water, and the faint hum of traffic. She stood in the middle of the bridge, gazing at the reflection of the clouds in the river. "This is how I want to remember it," she said. "Not the fighting, not the noise, just this." I wanted to tell her there'd be other moments like this, that we'd come back in the spring, that she'd see the cherry blossoms in the Tuileries. But something in her posture told me she already knew she wouldn't. We walked back in silence. By afternoon, the hotel suite was filled with the faint scent of flowers. The concierge had sent up a bouquet of white peonies with a handwritten note to Madame Delaney with respect and admiration. Eloise smiled when she read it. "Imagine that," she said. "Respect after 80 years. I laughed through the lump in my throat. She went to bed early that evening, saying she just wanted to close her eyes for a bit before dinner. I tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "Je t'aime, Grandma." She smiled, eyes half closed. "I love you too, my fierce girl." When I came back an hour later with her favorite tea, she was still, her hand resting over her chest, her expression peaceful. The light from the city fell gently across her face, turning her into something timeless, almost eternal. I stood there for a long time, unable to move, unable to speak. Paris didn't cry with me, it just kept shining like it knew the moment didn't need words. The next few days blurred together. The embassy helped, the hotel handled the rest. There were documents, signatures, arrangements. But what I remember most is the quiet, the kind of quiet that follows a storm that's burned itself out. Back in the States, the headlines changed tone. Philanthropist and innovator Evelyn Delaney passes away in Paris at 81. Below it, a smaller line read her granddaughter Isabella Collins to lead the newly formed Delaney Foundation for Women in Technology. My mother tried to reach me again. So did my father, even Nathan, but I didn't answer. Not out of anger, but because there was nothing left to say. The will, the foundation, the truth, they spoke louder than I ever could. 2 weeks later, the first scholarship letters went out. One went to a girl named Maya in Montana, another to a student in Louisiana, and one more to a high school senior in Washington who'd been told she was too intense for computer science. Each envelope carried the same closing line Eloise had written herself: "Keep building. The world needs your code." I read those words over and over. They sounded like her voice still guiding me. On a gray February morning, I returned to the bridge where we'd stood together. I scattered a handful of her ashes into the Seine, watching them swirl into the current. "You're free now," I whispered, "and so am I." The city shimmered, and for a moment I swore I could hear her laughter carried by the wind. A week later, I gave my first speech as executive director of the foundation. The event was small, a handful of donors, educators, and young women eager to start their journeys. I stood at the podium looking out at the faces in the room. "This isn't a story about money," I began. "It's a story about courage. The courage to build when no one believes in you, to speak when you've been silenced to take back what was always yours, your voice, your worth, your freedom. When the applause came, I didn't look for my parents in the crowd. I looked up, imagining Eloise somewhere above, rolling her eyes and saying, "Finally, she learned to take a bow." After the event, a young woman approached me, no older than 20. "Miss Collins," she said nervously, "I just wanted to thank you. I was told people like me don't belong in tech, but then I read about your grandmother, about you." I smiled. "Then don't let them write your story for you. Write your own." That night I sat in my office, our new foundation headquarters in Seattle. The walls were lined with photos of Eloise at the Eiffel Tower, at the museum on that bridge. Her favorite quote was etched in glass above the entryway: "No one shall be defined by their exclusion from a family table." I poured a glass of champagne and raised it to her portrait. "To us," I said softly. "To peace, to justice, to freedom." Outside, the city lights flickered across the water, reminding me of Paris. For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen, whole. And somewhere in that feeling, I understood what she had meant on that last morning, when she said she didn't want to leave. She hadn't. Not really. She lived on, not in marble or money, but in every girl who'd ever been told to shrink and instead decided to rise. So I keep her story alive. Every Christmas I light a candle, open the windows, and let the cold air in. I make tea the way she liked it. Dark, rich, strong, and I whisper, "We did it." And every time I share this story, every time someone listens, I feel her beside me smiling. If you've ever felt left out, silenced, or made to feel small, remember this: your silence doesn't make you invisible. It makes you powerful, because one day you'll find your voice. And when you do, the world will have to listen. If this story moved you, leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories about resilience, justice, and second chances. Because sometimes the quietest revenge is living a life that speaks louder than they ever did.